Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. Today I'm reviewing Solo. Now this is a new film directed by Ron Howard and stars Alden Ehrenreich. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I'm sorry if I do butcher that name. Emilia Clarke, Woody Harrelson, Donald Glover and Paul Bettany. And this is really the story of the beginning of Han Solo, where he came from, how he became what he became. It starts 10 years before the events of A New Hope. And it really follows him from this sort of rough and tumble area that he lives in, sort of like a ghetto, I guess, in a way, and how he's able to get out of there, and subsequently ends up joining the Imperial Army and goes to war, which he spends there for 3 years. And then it sort of looks at how he gets involved in the smuggling trade, which is something that he becomes really in depth at later in the in A New Hope and a variety of the other films after that. And it sort of looks at the beginning of this, and he meets the Woody Harrelson character, who becomes his sort of mentor in a way, and helps him, become good at what he's doing. It sort of follows how he meets Chewie for the first time and how that evolved and it happened, and then it also looks at how he first became a pilot, how he first met Lando, and how that worked, and how he ended up with the Millennium Falcon. Obviously in A New Hope and the other films as well, and the relationship between Solo and Lando. And this film really sort of follows the particular heist that he gets involved in. He's hired by Paul Bettany's character to try and retrieve some of this high-powered sort of explosive stuff. And it doesn't go according to plan, of course, and then it's ultimately having to do another heist and repay what is owed to Paul Bettany's character. And it sort of just unfolds from there, and we really get to see this character evolve and where he came from. We really get to see these other characters that are involved in his life, and it shows how these events that he goes through in this film really shape who he becomes in A New Hope, and where his head's at and what he's been involved in, and how he sort of gets involved in a way with Jabba the Hutt as well. It's very clever in that way, and we get to see and learn a lot more about him than we did know. And it's really good to have a sort of film like this, in a way, filling in the gaps of what happened to him before A New Hope, and how he got into the smuggling trade and involved with a variety of gangsters and bad guys, as well as how he met Lando and Chewie. Really, that's all I can sort of say about the plot of the film. I don't want to give too much away for people who haven't seen it or people who are going to see it. I like this film. I think Ron Howard is a solid filmmaker. He doesn't do anything flashy or spectacular or have a particular style, but he's a very solid and filmmaker, and his films are always, interesting to watch and are well sort of made. And this is no exception. I would have really liked to have seen the other two directors who were originally going to direct this and what they would have done with it. But Ron Howard makes a very solid film and a very interesting film to watch. I think Alden's really not bad. He's no Harrison Ford, but I really like what he brings to the character, and you sort of can believe that that's a young Han Solo who would go on to be the Harrison Ford Han Solo that everybody knows. And he does a sort of solid job in this film. I felt the first half of the film takes a little while to get going. You get a little sort of setting up things, and it doesn't feel quite real, and doesn't get going until he ultimately meets Lando and gets the Millennium Falcon, and how that sort of works, and then it becomes a really interesting film, and then really starts to feel like a Star Wars film. Visually, it's pretty good. There's some spectacular action sequences and visuals that are really powerful, and you look at different planets and different worlds within there, and different creatures, and it's really fascinating what they do with that, and I'm really interested in how they make it look and feel. It's quite an interesting film to experience, especially at the cinema. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the acting. Like I mentioned, Alden does a really good job as the young Han Solo. He's not a spectacular actor, but he gives a very solid performance in this. And he does have a bit of charisma and a bit of smart aleck sort of way about him, that much like Harrison Ford does. But Harrison Ford really made that character his own. And bringing in someone else to play him, a younger version of him, there would be always people who like the idea and not like the idea of having him in there. And people are going to either like him or hate him, I guess. But I think he does a solid job. Emilia Clarke, she's another actress that, look, she's not really for me. She can give solid performance, and she does well in this film as Qi'ra, as sort of a love interest for the young Han Solo. but I just don't find her have much charisma. There's something about her that I don't overly like as an actress, and I struggle a little bit with. She, like I said, she does a pretty good job here. But really, and Woody Harrelson, like, he's a bit controlled in this. If they let Woody Harrelson be Woody Harrelson and let him create the characters the way he does, it would have been a bit more interesting. But I think he does a solid job here, and he's always fun to watch on screen in whatever role he chooses and whatever movie he's in. I think the real standouts for me for this film are Donald Glover's Lando. I think Donald Glover is a brilliant and talented man, a very talented actor and musician and writer, and it's very interesting to see him play this sort of character. And he brings such suaveness and real likability to the Lando character. And I really loved his performance in it. It was really great. And he has a droid that is his second mate, which is L3. And she's a very interesting and fascinating droid, very fun. Always talking about equal rights and freeing robots and stuff like that. She's really great in that aspect. And the banter between her and Lando, Donald Glover's Lando, is brilliant. And I think he's a real standout, as well as L3 and their whole part in the film, as well as the reveal of the Millennium Falcon and how the first flight of it with these characters. Chewie is really good in this, I think. Chewie's always been an interesting character, but he gets a bit more action in this and you feel a bit more for him, and you start to see how him and Han became friends and how that transpired and how they became co-pilots and went on a lot of missions and bits and pieces together. And it's really great to see him in this, giving a really, really great sort of solid performance. And you can see that Han knows a little bit of Wookiee and can speak that, which is really, really great. And the banter between them is really good as well. And I think all the performances in that regard are really, really great. And Paul Bettany's like a solid bad guy. He's sort of a bit cliched and they could have done a little bit more with him, but it's kind of interesting. And they just look at sort of the Empire and the Rebellion and the variety of other stuff that transpires, and that leads us into A New Hope. And there's some cameos by particular characters that do appear in this film too, which I think is quite clever. There's really great planets as well. Like there's a sand planet they go to, which is really great. Where they go to get this particular energy source is really good too. It looks really colourful. And they have to go through like a cloud storm to get there. There's some really great shots of an Imperial ship appearing and different things like that. I don't want to give too much away. But it was really well done, and the visuals are really spectacular in this. I don't think it's as well, doesn't look as beautiful as Rogue One, even though it's a better film, I think, in all regards, acting and story-wise, than Rogue One. But it contributes a bit to the Star Wars canon and the Star Wars universe. And that's the sort of stuff I like. It had good music, and there was moments where the old classic score began, and there was other things that they added to which I thought were really great and sort of added a bit more story to what was happening. I do admit some of the things that they introduced, like shortening Chewbacca's name to Chewie and stuff like that, these little bits and pieces along the way, just feel a bit forced. And they feel like they're just put there so we know the references and where they sort of came from. The only other criticism I do have is the first half of the film is just too dark, not in tone, but in look. It's just really, really dark. Like you can't really see much of the characters and the actors, and you don't really know what you're looking at a lot of the times. There is a bit of a reference to World War II during the war scenes with the clothing that they have, but even that is too dark. It isn't until they go to lighter planets that we start to see that. It was like they could have really use some lights. The natural light look doesn't ultimately work too well for the Star Wars universe, I feel, and I think this let it down a little bit. It did get better towards later in the picture, but I just felt that was just too dark for us to see anything to begin with. Ultimately, this may not be a film that everyone likes. I think it's a very good and well-made film. Maybe it's a lot better than the prequels, I feel, and a lot better than Rogue One story-wise and character-wise. But it doesn't come close to the original films, A New Hope, Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back, all of those three films. It doesn't come close to them, but it is a good contribution to that particular world and that, and the Star Wars universe. And final verdict. I like this was a solid film. If you're a fan of the Star Wars universe, you may like enjoy this. If you like Han Solo, want to see sort of where he began in a way before it all, or you're interested in Lando or Chewie or any of those sort of characters, or the world that he came from and how different it was going into A New Hope, you may enjoy this. This film may not be for everyone, that a lot of other critics have said. Look, if you want a fun and entertaining movie that doesn't take itself too serious, with a bit of heart, some great action sequences, and something that looks really nice and fun, this is definitely for you. You'll probably thoroughly enjoy this film. Anyone who's a Star Wars fan will probably get a lot out of this as well. Look, I'm going to give this film 4 out of 5, and a solid 4 as well, because I just think that it is, a solid film, does really well, and it's very interesting. I got swept up in it, and just to see Han and Chewie in the Millennium Falcon together flying it, that's brought me back to childhood, and I thoroughly enjoyed those moments. And the little Star Wars tune that came on with that sort of threw me right back to childhood when I was first watching A New Hope, and the other 2 films as well, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. It just took me back. It was a nostalgic moment, much like the moment where Han Solo and Chewie first appear in Force Awakens. That takes you back as well. Anyway, that's all from me today. If you've enjoyed what you've heard here, please hit subscribe down the bottom. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.